Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Green Jeans. We've been taking a little bit of a break, but we are back now, ready and ever, and hopefully you guys are excited that we're back because we're excited to be back. So I am your one co-host, Anneke Van Rossum, joined by my other co-host,
Maya Van Rossum.
And if you couldn't tell by our last names, we are a mother-daughter duo who talk about important environmental and social justice issues through a generational lens because for some reason, all the things that my mom's generation has been raising alarm bells about and talking about for decades is still a problem that mine and future generations are battling at this very moment in time. So we just talk about it through that and hope to get everybody inspired in the fight for, whatever cause you think is important to you. But yeah, Mom, you want to talk about, what's been going on, why we're on a break, all that stuff?
Well, I think that you're the one who actually we're going to have to talk about it for a little bit because we took a little bit of a break because you just graduated from law school and you had some things to do in the wake of that and you needed to get the next phase of your life started. So why don't you tell us, Anneke, how it feels to have your law degree and be done with your education at this point and now a real working professional. And what are you doing?
Yeah, so I graduated from law school. This is my first time. I mean, I've worked in the summers, but this is like my first time not going back to school in September. So it's really weird. It definitely felt weird, probably like at the end of August to wake up and go like, oh, I'm just going to work. I don't have to pack and go anywhere different. But yeah, so I graduated from law school. And I'm now working at Delaware Riverkeeper Network as the advocacy and policy coordinator. So putting my law degree to good use. It's really cool. And I also just have to take a second to say for anybody who probably just went through any big tests like myself, who spent the summer studying for the bar exam and things like that. Don't have my results back, but that's okay. Your life and everything that's going to go on in your life is so much more than one test. So whether you don't pass this go around and you decide to never take it again, you decide to take it as many times as you have to pass, it's okay. Not everybody passes on the first try. Some people never pass. Some people decide not to take it again. And it just means there are bigger and better things down the line, or now you'll be even more prepared for the next time you have to take it. So just a little word of encouragement for everybody that I'm sure is antsy about their bar results.
So Anneke, now that you're out of law school and able to pay attention to what's actually happening in the real world, how does it feel and what's it looking like from where you're sitting?
It's a good, bad. It's like good that I can now actually read headlines and be able to go react to them rather than kind of have 10-15 minutes to read the article, be upset about it, and then have to go to homework. It was definitely very devastating during bar prep, actually in the middle of a bar prep lecture, to see come across my phone screen that the Roe v. Wade decision was overturned. And it was very frustrating to see a lot of uprising going on and feeling like I couldn't participate in that because I had to put bar prep first. For me, that was what I felt like I had to do. So that was really hard. So it's nice now that at least when something happens, I can kind of react to it. And also because I get to work at Delaware Riverkeeper Network, a lot of things that come across my news feed or a lot of things that are important to me, I actually am getting firsthand knowledge or I'm able to then go and work on it. So that's at least cool that I can now be an activist in real life rather than walking around law school and being mad and all of us talking about how mad we are about it.
And a lot of what we're seeing in the news headlines is really about how at the federal level, government officials are abusing their authority. They're abusing their authority to gain access to classified documents that they're not entitled to. They're misusing their authority to overturn 50 years of precedent and take away from people their bodily autonomy, people with a uterus. They're misusing their authority to try to trick and transport immigrants who are already in a compromised state, right? Really defenseless and in need of help, to use them as political pawns in political partisan games. And I mean, it's just so sad and shocking to see what is happening on the federal level on all of these different important social justice, national security fronts. But for our listeners, Anneke and I thought it might be interesting to just talk a little bit about some specific examples of how government officials have been misusing their authority when it comes to the environment and some issues that are happening down on the local level. So Anneke, do you want to start with the first example and take it away, or you want me to dig in?
I can start with it, but I might need you to fill in a gap in this one. So basically one of the things we do at Delaware River Keeper Network, obviously, is we protect the Delaware River. One of the agencies that we kind of, pay attention to what's going on is called the Delaware River Basin Commission. And so if you don't know, basically, because the Delaware River runs from New York, PA, New Jersey, and Delaware way back when, it was a big kerfuffle for all these municipal and state and federal agencies to manage this massive connected waterway. And so what was created is called a compact. There's also one in Colorado because it's the same kind of structure with the river. So the compact created, basically there's a representative who represents the federal government and then the 4 governors of each of the states. And they meet and they are in charge of, watching water quality, making decisions on that, all the blah, blah, blah. You can learn more about it if you want, but that's the basics of it. So something kind of backdoor happened with a recent vote that I got to witness and then had to talk about at DRBC, but maybe you can explain better how we found out about this backdoor decision and actually how the public was then excluded from being able to speak on it and actually even learn about it.
So amongst the many issues that the Delaware Riverkeeper Network tackles is proposals to liquefy natural gas in order to export it overseas for sale in other countries. And here in the Delaware River watershed, there is a proposal for a liquefied natural gas export facility, what's called an LNG export facility down in Gibbstown, New Jersey. A facility like this has to get approvals at the state level. They have to get approvals at the federal level. But here within the Delaware River watershed, you also have to get an approval from the Delaware River Basin Commission that Anneke just talked about. At the Delaware River Basin Commission, the actual decision makers are, as Anneke indicated, the governors of the 4 states, or a representative of the governors of the 4 states, and then a representative for the president. So it's a 5-panel sort of 5 commissioners render the decisions. But there is also a staff at the DRBC, and amongst the staff members is an executive director. A number of years ago, the Delaware River Basin Commission actually gave its approval for this LNG export facility. The Delaware Riverkeeper Network and partner organizations and individuals from within Gibbstown and around the region fought mightily to stop that approval. And actually at Delaware Riverkeeper Network, we even challenged it legally. And unfortunately, we were not successful in that legal challenge. And so a number of years ago, the LNG export facility in Gibbstown got its DRBC approval. But that approval was set to expire, right? It's only for a limited number of years, and it was actually set to expire. The owners and operators of the export facility went behind the scenes and quietly asked the executive director of the Delaware River Basin Commission to please provide an extension on the DRBC's approval for an additional, what was it, Anneke? 3 years, I believe. And the executive director happily complied and gave them that multi-year extension. The problem is, under the rules of practice and procedure, right, that guide the way the DRBC is supposed to operate, the decision about whether or not to grant that kind of extension needs to come from the commissioners themselves. And it needs to come from the commissioners after there's been an opportunity for public review and public comment. So when the executive director quietly behind the scenes granted this extension, he circumvented the entire public process and really the rights and the authority of the commissioners to render the ultimate decision. The only way the Delaware Riverkeeper Network and the public in general actually learned about that quiet, what we view to be secret granting of an extension. The only way we learned about it was that the Delaware Riverkeeper Network regularly puts in information requests to the DRBC as well as to other state and federal agencies to keep track of what's actually happening with regards to this Gibbstown LNG export facility. And in response to one of those information requests, which is something that we do under the law, often you'll hear them at the federal level, it's called a Freedom of Information Act request. At the state level, it has different names, either right to know request, Open Public Records Act request. It's different in every state, but essentially the people have a right to ask their government officials to release documents for public review, documents that are part of the day-to-day operations of the agency, letters, emails, memos, reports, analyses, right? So in response to one of these Freedom of Information Act requests to the Delaware River Basin Commission, we learned about this quick, quiet approval of an extension by the executive director for the Gibbstown LNG export facility. And nobody would have ever been the wiser, but for the fact that we did that Freedom of Information Act request. And so it was quite shocking. And ever since then, we have been trying to get the proper procedures followed for this extension request. And that's really where Anneke's part of the story kicks in.
Yeah, so it's a open meeting to the public. But it's through Zoom, so you're kind of having to sit there and watch, and there's no function but raise hand function or anything. So you're just you're there, but there's not that much to do at the moment that the official business meeting is going on. So the opportunity to vote on the extension came up, and it did pass. There was almost a unanimous vote for the extension, except for, and so I have to give a lot of credit to the state of New York, who abstained from the vote, and basically their whole reasoning and the comment that was given several times, even after the vote, urging why the vote was wrong, was that this was wrong. There needed to be an opportunity for public comment. There needed to be an opportunity for transparency. The public deserved to give their voice on this, and that the commission needed to listen to that, and that it really wasn't transparent. So that was really great that New York did take that stand for people. So that was very appreciatory. And then the public comment period began, and clearly people were upset about this vote. People were commenting that they were upset about it and that they were left out of it. And there was a comment made also that public comment had happened and that there was opportunity for it, but there was an opportunity for this extension, which is 3 years is a really long time. And to not even give, I don't like it, but again, they could still have voted for the extension, but to not even give the public an opportunity to say what they had to say and bring up issues that the commission should have to listen to, I think is a real disservice to what they're supposed to be doing and what they should be standing for. I think, again, the bare minimum of what we ask for and what we expect of our representatives and legislative officials is that they sit and listen. The next step is that they listen and they do what the people are asking them to do. But the bare minimum, you should have to sit there and listen and hear the concerns of people, and they just totally threw that out the door at this meeting. So that was very upsetting.
Yeah, and just so people understand, the way the meeting played out was that the commissioners held a vote to rubber stamp the behind the scenes approval by the executive director without providing any opportunity for public comment before they took that vote. At these meetings, there is always, just as with most public meetings of the government, there's an opportunity at the end of the meeting for what they call open public comment, where the public can come in and comment on anything relevant to that agency. And so when people got to stand up and express their concern and upset with the process, with the extension, with what the executive director had done, and with the rubber stamp approval by the commissioners, without giving the people an opportunity to be heard on the actual extension request, those comments came after the fact. And so really it was just people expressing their anger and their upset at a time and in a way that wouldn't make a difference. So, I'm still, despite all my years of advocacy, I am still shocked and disturbed when our government officials misuse their authority that way. And we had another example also linked to the Delaware River and to fossil fuels just recently as well. Many people have heard us talk about, or if you're from the region, you know that the Delaware River Basin Commission years ago, largely in response to the advocacy led by the Delaware Riverkeeper Network and partner organizations and tens of thousands of people from all over the region, the Delaware River Basin Commission put in place a moratorium that prevented fracking for fossil fuels from shale from ever advancing within the boundaries of the Delaware River watershed. Since we secured that moratorium, we've been working to get it turned into a ban. And actually recently, the ban on the fracking portion of the operations was in fact put in place by the Delaware River Basin Commission. There are other portions of the ban having to do with the importation for treatment, storage, and disposal into the watershed of toxic frack wastewater. That part of the original moratorium was not extended by the ban on fracking, nor was the prohibition on water withdrawals from the basin to support fracking elsewhere, nor was that included in the permanent ban. And so the battle for those two aspects of the moratorium to be turned into a permanent ban goes on. But with that little backdrop, Anneke, one of the parts of the story that has been going on, frankly, for a number of years is that there are a lot of pro-fracking legislators in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but there are some that are much more passionate about their pro-fracking stance than others. And amongst them are Senators Yaw and Senator Baker. And Senators Yaw and Baker have been trying a myriad of legal of pathways using the courts to try to get the moratorium now ban overturned. And in the most, and they keep losing. They lose every time because they're not right. It's not the right thing to do. But their most recent legal action was filed in federal court, and they make a number of claims. But the thing that was so shocking to me was that amongst the claims Senator Yaw, Senator Baker, and actually the Republican caucus made was that the constitutional environmental rights amendment that exists in the Pennsylvania Constitution, which actually grants and protects the rights of all Pennsylvanians to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment, and puts in place an obligation on all government officials in the state to protect the natural resources of the state for present and future generations. Senators Yaw and Senator Baker and the Republican caucus tried to argue to the court that constitutional green amendment, environmental rights amendment, actually obliged them to allow fracking to happen in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, despite its devastating consequences on the environment, because when fracking is allowed, the state gets money that the state can then turn around and use for environmental protection. And that therefore the DRBC ban on fracking was preventing them as government officials from being able to fulfill their constitutional obligation to protect the environment and the environmental rights of Pennsylvania, as the Constitution requires. It's a really twisted argument, but essentially comes down to saying we have an obligation to protect the natural resources of the state and the environmental rights of the people. And we can best do that by allowing our natural resources to be devastated so we can make money that we can then turn around and argue that we're using in some way for environmental protection. Very twisted.
Yeah, so I think for people too that like to really boil it down, the natural resources are part of a trust, and usually how a trust works is you have the trustee who's in charge of it, you have what's in the trust, which is usually money, and then you have the beneficiary who, when whatever the trust language says, gets the money out of the trust. And so the Commonwealth is the trustee of the public natural resources, and they're supposed to manage it for the people. But it's and I feel like every time a case like this comes up, it's always this argument where, and they tried to do it this time, they're trying to say, well, this is a money trust. And the Republicans tried to say this requires the liquidation of public natural resources for cash. That like this requires us to do it. We're supposed to drill down and take everything out. And I was just really happy. Again, the court, said the problem with this argument is that it ignores the explicit purpose of the Environmental Rights Amendment, which, you're very good at explaining, like, this is not, and the way it was set up, it's not a money trust. It's not meant for the profit to expand. It's meant for the natural resources to be there for the people to access it when they want to. And the natural resources don't just include, it's like in this case, we're talking about fracking, but it includes people being able to breathe clean air and being able to enjoy pure water. And it's not like there's nothing about that involves maximizing profits and getting cash, as they so eloquently put it.
Yeah. And that's really, to me, just to bring it back to our topic, that's really for me what the abuse is that these government officials sought to misuse the right of the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment, the right of future generations to have their natural resources protected by our government officials, that these legislators sought to misuse that constitutional right of the people to actually argue for devastation of the environment through the advancement of fracking. And as you indicated, Anneke, wonderfully, the federal court said, no, you're wrong, that the ban on fracking actually serves the constitutional obligation to protect the natural resources of the state. It strengthens it, it empowers it, it serves it, it doesn't undermine it. And as a result, the legislators, amongst the many things they argued badly and did not win on, amongst them was that they were unable to demonstrate that actually they were injured because this ban on fracking helps fulfill their obligation to conserve, protect, and maintain the natural resources of the state. It doesn't undermine that authority and that power of them as legislators. So that was a really wonderful outcome. And I do want to give a nod also, while Senators Yaw and Senator Baker are such bad actors when it comes to the environment in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we have a lot of wonderful legislators like Senator Steve Sanacero, Senator Katie Muth, who actually, along with I and the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, did actually intervene in this legal action to stand in defense of the environment and in defense of the people and in defense of the DRBC's ban on fracking. So there are a lot of bad actors in government, but I think there are a lot more good actors in government, and those are amongst them. So I just wanted to give a nod to them. So Anneke, now that's two examples of abuses of power happening in dramatically different ways. Somebody misusing their power behind the scenes in sort of a secret subterfuge to allow something bad to happen. Another is where legislators are very openly and very publicly trying to twist the constitutional Green Amendment, Environmental Rights Amendment, and try to get to be able to use it to serve their goals of destroying the environment in order to make profits on fracking. What's another example that we can bring to people about ways in the environmental context that we have government officials misusing their power and authority?
Yeah, so this one actually came this morning when I was driving back from the gym. You hear a lot of those like, have you been in an auto accident recently? Call 1-800 blah blah blah, we'll get you your money. So it was one of those, I tuned out, and then I heard what it was, like, it's called Camp Lejeune, and it was involving water contamination. So I looked it up this morning because I've never heard about it. So this is from SoCo Love Law, and they're one of those that you could probably contact if you needed. But they write on their website that basically from 1953 to 1987, the drinking water at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina was contaminated with dangerous chemicals that can cause cancer and other serious health issues. So it said in 1982, the U.S. Marine Corps discovered dangerous chemicals known as volatile organic compounds. And the contamination began in 1953 and continued to expose base workers, service members, and their families until 1987, according to the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. And some of the chemicals that they report being found were benzene, tetrachloroethylene, trichloroethylene, and vinyl chloride. And a lot of these, basically, to sum it all up, are linked to cancer-causing issues. And also, they write, exposure to these chemicals can also increase the risk of birth defects and other health problems. And so, if we're talking about a U.S. military base, and they do say families, so, there's also the risk of pregnant people going to go visit their partner and drinking the water there, and that is an issue. But yeah, it was crazy. And there are things going on. It's called the Camp Lejeune Justice Act of 2022. And that seems to be revolved around helping people that have been affected by this. And it does seem like people are getting some kind of monetary compensation. But again, we're talking like probably for many people, who knows how many years of exposure, especially if this started in 53 and only was discovered and maybe ended in 87. I haven't done the full research, so, I'm sure there's more to this. But, there's money can only solve so much when your body has been poisoned. Money can only solve so much when your child is already born with a birth defect, when you're already so far into cancer treatment. So it's one of those, I'm glad something's being done about it. I'm glad the alarm bells are being raised. I'm glad people are getting some help. But as we've seen with a lot of these government sites, and, you've heard in past episodes, Nicole Olanovich, who was poisoned while she was in military service. It's not like the government doesn't know something is up, at least at a certain point, and they definitely aren't acting on it quickly enough once they discover it, in my opinion. I feel like there's a lot of, we realize something is wrong, and it's just too little too late.
Yeah, and it's actually, your opinion is borne out by the facts. So, amongst the stories that I talk about in my book, The Green Amendment, I in the upcoming second edition, I actually do talk about Nicole Olanovich, who, while serving in Afghanistan, was intentionally forced to work near a burn pit where everything was burned, good, bad, and otherwise, on the military base. And military service members like Nicole were forced day in and day out to breathe in the toxins that came off of that burn pit. And it really has had devastating consequences for them. And we are also hearing about federal legislation now. I mean, over recent weeks, we've been hearing a lot more about burn pits and the devastating consequences for the health of service members. But as you said, it's sort of too little, too late. And there's no way the military didn't know that burning tires and fuel and jet fuel and other things in these fires and forcing service members to work nearby, that it wasn't going to have serious implications for their health. But it's not just operating irresponsibly when it comes to service members. Another one of the stories that I talk about in the book, and that people are hearing more and more about in the press, is how the Department of Defense on many of these bases, in a variety of ways, use something called PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl chemicals. They use them in firefighting foams primarily, and they use them in ways that allow these contaminants to proliferate and get into the environment, including into drinking water supplies. What we now know is that the Department of Defense actually knew that these PFAS chemicals were dangerous to the environment and dangerous to human health. And yet they allowed them to be continued to be used on their bases in ways that expose the workers and the service members on the base to these dangerous contaminants, but also that allow these dangerous contaminants to go down the drain into the environment, into drinking water supplies. And at this point, contaminate drinking water supplies in, the last I saw was it's in over 33 states. It's millions of people who have been literally drinking contaminated water for many, many years in ways that are having serious consequences for their health. The military's been caught, things finally are kind of starting to happen. But as you said, a lot of it is just too little, too late. If you've already been exposed, you've already suffered health consequences, the damage is already done. For the farmers who had their cows and the milk produced by their dairy herds contaminated by PFAS that was in the water, they've lost their herds, they've lost the milk. Literally, there are stories of farmers who had to dump millions of gallons of milk down the drain, or I'm not sure they dumped it down the drain, get rid of it, dispose of it, because it was so contaminated with PFAS that they couldn't sell it, right? It wasn't safe. They were forced to get rid of it. That had devastating consequences for them economically. We already know how for many, many farmers, it's already difficult, right? That way of life is already difficult economically. We also know that at this point, because of PFAS in the environment, and by the way, PFAS hasn't just proliferated in the environment because of the Department of Defense, also private industries like DuPont and Solvay, who actually created it and or used it in ways, were allowed to use it in ways that allowed the contaminant to get into the environment because government officials who were aware of the dangers didn't pass any regulations in order to stop the use of those chemicals in those harmful ways. The result is additional contamination to drinking water supplies, additional contamination, right, to for farmers, but also deer and fish are contaminated by PFAS. And so now there are fish advisories and prohibitions on hunting for deer in some states, because to consume the flesh of the fish or the deer is dangerous to human health. That has impacts for human health, has impacts for the environment. It has impacts for those who value recreational hunting or fishing, and it has impacts for the businesses that depend upon recreational fishing, hunting, and other things. So, it's this vast expanding web of damage because the Department of Defense and or industries who were not regulated by government officials, and still to this day are largely not regulated, were allowed to and knowingly continued to use these dangerous chemicals, wreaking so much havoc and harm.
Yeah, I think too, just when we throw around the phrase like in drinking water, it's really hard to kind of process it. So after I heard it, and it was kind of coming from the gym today, you're recommended to drink like a half gallon to a gallon of water a day. And this guy that I was working out next to had his big gallon jug of water. And on hearing that and then driving back, and I just pictured like that whole thing filled with chemicals is what people are ingesting on a daily basis, and at places like this where they're doing it for days, weeks, months. And so I think just kind of, if you picture just a gallon jug full of chemicals and that's what you're drinking every day, it kind of rounded it out for me of like, oh man, not good.
But as we've also alluded to, right, there's a lot of good action happening on this front. The Pennsylvania Green Amendment did stand strong against those legislators. At the Delaware River Basin Commission, we may not have won the day on that secret vote extension, but we sure as heck did win the day on getting that ban on fracking. And we will win the day when it comes to the toxic wastewater and the water withdrawals as well. We have a Green Amendment movement that is advancing in states across the nation where people are seeking and securing constitutional environmental rights amendments like Pennsylvania has that will really help the people to stand up against government when government fails us. So, we've talked about some of the sad and the bad, but we've also along the way talked about some of the really powerful and really good. And, people, all you have to do is get involved with an organization like the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, like Green Amendments for the Generations, your local watershed association, and you can become part of the solution and stand up against this bad stuff and help prevent the harm before it starts.
Exactly. I think you summed it up all perfectly. But before we go, we have one announcement besides that we're back. In just over a month, you have something exciting happening, Mom.
I do. That's so nice of you to bring it up. So the second edition of my book, The Green Amendment, is coming out November 1. And this time around, it's called The Green Amendment, The People's Fight for a Clean, Safe, and Healthy Environment. I really believe in the Green Amendment movement and the power of meaningful constitutional environmental rights amendments like the one we talked about in Pennsylvania. For listeners, if you've read my previous book or you've listened to this show before, you know that only Pennsylvania, Montana, and now as of last year, New York have this kind of constitutional protection. But my vision, my goal, my mission is to get a constitutional green amendment in every state constitution across our nation and one at the federal level. So truly, when it comes to the environment, the people are the ones with the ultimate power, not our government officials. So I'm really excited about the second edition of the book coming out. There are new stories, new ways of thinking about this issue, and new ways that I try to put out there that to make it really, really clear that there's a role for everybody in this Green Amendment movement. We need you, we want you, and you can really help make a difference and help to save the world by getting involved. So November 1, and if anybody goes to mayavanrossum.green or goes to forthegenerations.org and the book page, you will find a pathway to whatever is your preferred bookseller in order to purchase a copy. I'm getting a lot of really, really kind reviews, both personal reviews, but also professional reviews from operations like Kirkus Reviews gave an amazing review a couple of weeks ago. So I'm really excited by the positive attention. And remember, if you buy the book, every single penny goes back to environmental protection. Not a penny goes into my pocket, because it's not about making profits. It's about saving the world.
And we will also be sure to link that down in the episode description. So if you're on Spotify or YouTube right now, you can just go right down and pre-order now. Don't forget, Christmas is not as far away, or your holiday of choice is not as gift-giving holiday is not as far away as it seems. Really jumbled that one. All right. So thank you. And thanks for joining us. And we hope to see you next time.
See you next time.